Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome everyone into Garden of Doom, and we're here with L.A. Marzulli. Did I say it right?
Marzulli.
God, I'm having so much trouble today. And we're going to talk about what everyone knows is my favorite topic, and at least 70% of the inspiration for this show even existing, and that is the Nephilim or the Nephilim, or any way you want to pronounce those three syllables. And I came across, I'm not even sure where I came across LA, but I saw you probably on one of the various Facebook groups that I either follow, or because I follow them, I get other links. And you seem to have a very good grasp and theory and take and opinions on it, a little bit more detailed than some. And so I reached out to you, and you were kind enough to say yes. So without further ado, welcome into the Garden of Doom, and just tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
I'm an author, 13 and a half books. The half is the rungs on the UFO ladder of disclosure. We're really closing in on it. I got a plane ride tomorrow to a conference, Dr. Michael Lake's conference in Missouri, and I find that I get a lot of work done on planes. And it's a captive audience, can't go anywhere, can't do anything, the phone's not going to ring. Now I can get on, the internet, which sometimes I do, but if I'm just writing, it's a great way to knock off a chapter. And the last couple of chapters I knocked off on a plane. So there's 13 and a half books. There's 30 films. 30. I've either directed, I've hosted all 30 of them. So I've either, co-directed or co-produced or produced or directed 30 films. It's a lot of work. We have a few minutes here tonight. Obviously, we will scratch the surface on the corpus of work that has been accomplished since I started all this stuff. I do 5 shows a week on our YouTube channel. I think we're up to like 215,000 subscribers and growing. I speak at conferences all over the United States and sometimes the world. I'm on countless podcasts, TV programs all over the place. I'm a born-again, spirit-filled Christian. I'm a frank supernaturalist. I believe we are in the end times. I believe that Yeshua, Jesus, is going to come back soon. I believe that in the pre-millennial dispensational truth. I believe in a literal millennial kingdom where Jesus reigns and rules, not from Walla Walla, Michigan, but from Jerusalem. I believe that the tribulation is the time of Jacob's trouble, not the church's. We won't be here for that. So I think we're closing in on it. I think it's a very interesting window of time that we find ourselves in, unprecedented in all of human history. And I also think that these guys are going to be back sooner than we all think.
Okay. So since this is audio, you can't see it, but he was holding it off. But what you would all know to be a flying saucer, and probably sort of the prototypical one from the movies that you saw from between the 1950s and the 1970s, and still occasionally as well. So I love it. It's ancient astronauts, Anunnaki as divine, or antithesis to divine, which is, not an unusual theory. I came upon myself, and I thought I was really clever until I realized that the 52,000 other people had come up with the same thing. But that's not unusual, and that's okay. So I guess start from the start. I guess, how did you get interested in this? Was it before you were born again? Was it after? Did one lead to the other? What part of your personal story led you to focus on this kind of work?
Well, I've been always interested in the arcane, in the occult, in the New Age, in spirituality in general. I saw my first UFO at 12 years old at Boy Scout Camp Horseshoe at Rising Sun, Maryland. If there's anyone listening that remembers that day, there were four of us, four boys, walking up this little trail. I could take you right to the place. And that trail still is in existence today. So if any of the three other guys, you're listening to this, la@lamarzulli.net, shoot me an email. I'd love to talk to you. But we were walking up this trail, and the lead guy goes, "Wow, what's that?" And he points. And the other two guys go, "Wow, what is that?" I go, "Where?" And they point, "There." And I look up. It's a classic silver disc UFO. Watched it for 20 to 25 seconds. The thing shot straight up, vanished from sight in the twinkling of an eye. We ran back to Camp Horseshoe, to our camp, Boy Scout Troop 113. That was our Boy Scout Troop number 113. And Camp Horseshoe, Rising Sun, Maryland. If you're out there, shoot me an email, la@lamarzulli.net. It's been a long time, and you need to come on the record with Uncle LA here. So your brother LA. So we saw UFO. We saw a flying saucer. All the kids came out, the scoutmasters. I can see it like it's yesterday. They encircled us. What would it look like? What did it look? A gleaming silver disc in the sky. That was the lunch meal. By the evening meal, the other three boys denied that they had ever seen anything. And I refused to back down. I know what I saw. Mm-hmm. And, that was when I was like 11 or 12. When I was 13, I was confirmed in the Catholic Church. I promptly left the church. And then it was a quest to find out what was the meaning of life. The thing that really, really just completely overturned everything. I had been going out with Michelle since I was 16. She was 14. I used to go over to her parents' house, and her father, Howard, would just grill me like nobody's business, right? And we'd sit back in his little man cave with the deer heads on the wall, and, he'd be drinking scotch and I'd be drinking a Coke because I'm only 16. Right. And, I loved that man. He was a really cool guy. He's passed away. And I dated Michelle for 2 years. And, one night I got a call. My father came in and said, "Michelle's been killed in an automobile accident." It was a hit and run. So I'm 18 at this point. She's 16. That event changed my life. I mean, that event absolutely changed my life. And because, as a child or as a teenager, not a child, but as a teenager coming into manhood, wait a minute, all of a sudden, this death thing, the finality of it is overwhelming. The finality that you'll never see this person again. It's done. It's over with. Not on this side. You'll never see her again. And all I'm left, I remember I made this huge peace sign. This is, circa 1969, right? I made this huge peace sign out of flowers and stuff and laid it on her grave. And I didn't go back to that grave till the 40th anniversary. And I didn't know where it was anymore. I had to call her sister and find out. And I went there 40 years later and I realized, oh my gosh, my kids, Sarah, I think, was 23. Corey was like 26, and here's Michelle laying in a grave. She was killed at 16. So it was not lost on me. But that event is the singular event which starts me looking. And I'm reading Carlos Castaneda's books, the Yaqui Way of Knowledge. I'm reading Ouspensky's. I'm reading Earth's Earliest Ages by G.H. Pember. That's years later. I mean, I'm like looking at Eastern mysticism, the fakirs, the gurus, because the Beatles brought in Eastern mysticism. And in the 60s, there was the greatest occult explosion since before World War II, since the Nazis brought in the whole occult stuff in the 30s. This was unbelievable. And I'm immersed in it, looking for something. And at 21 years old, so skip a few years, I'm in this little town in Pennsylvania near Valley Forge, and there's a little poster. The God of the universe, the Lord of the universe, has come to us today. That was interesting. So I take the poster. I drag my friend John down to hear this kid. At this time, he's 14 years old, and we're in this theater packed with hippies, wall-to-wall hippies. And, of course, I was one. And the guru was about 2 hours late. They had some band up there playing music to try to placate the crowd. And the little kid walked in, 14 years old, and he basically talked for 2-3 hours about how precious this knowledge was. This knowledge will free you, and it's a thing everybody's been looking for, blah, blah, blah. And I was prepped for it because I had been reading all these books about Eastern mysticism, Eastern meditation, opening up the third eye. I mean, all this stuff. I was already halfway in there. So the next day I go down. John didn't accompany me. And I sat for probably 6 hours, 7 hours with 50 to 100 other people in the ashram. And at the end of the thing, the Mahatma gave us all knowledge. He opened up my third eye. I heard divine music. I tasted divine nectar. And 2 weeks later, I was living in the ashram, dedicating my life to the Lord of the universe. And I would be with the ashram and in Guru Maharaj's circle for about 3 years until I realized that I hadn't changed, that this was... I remember sitting there with a guy by the name of John. We weren't supposed to smoke cigarettes, but John and I are out smoking cigarettes, right? And John looks at me and goes, what would happen if you were told you were God from the moment you were born, or that you were divine, or you were this? And that was like the beginning of the whole guru thing just collapsing. And I left after that. I had given everything, all my money, all my everything. I left with $35 in my pocket and a box full of hand tools and a power saw, a hammer, a tool belt, stuff like that. And $35, no car, no transportation, in Malibu, California. And I had $35. That paid for 1 week at a room at Anita. I won't say her last name. She was renting a room in her house. And I rented the room for $35, not knowing when I would get the next $35. Well, it just so happened that she was building a guest house, and the carpenter walked off the job, and it was halfway finished. I'll do it for you. And she loved it and that was it. And that's, it's 50 years ago, 50 years ago. And, I was, immersed in the New Age, still believe that. But promptly after I left, I sort of became an agnostic. And it would be another 6 years before I would sort of come across the line and, ask Jesus to come in. As funny as that sounds, because people don't know what that is. But as human beings, we have to actually come up to the line and we have to ask. because he just won't barge in. You have to ask. And it's very simple. You just go, okay, please come into my life and do whatever you're going to do. That happened 44 years ago. My life has never been the same. And I've always been interested in the New Age, UFOs, all that completely. And all that began to switch when I came across the line. It would be another 10 years. So from 30 to 40, I'm immersed in all things. I'm a student of the Bible. I'm definitely a student of prophecy. The Shroud of Turin completely blows me away. I'm a amateur syndenologist. The Shroud of Turin, in my opinion, is God's calling card, the most studied artifact in all of history, and on it goes. And at 40, the Lord said, okay, now we're going to get back into this. And that's a long time ago now, basically. I was 40 years old. I'm 73. So even though I was immersed in all this and had read all this stuff and on UFOs and everything else, now we were looking at it through the biblical lens. And I got this book called The Omega Conspiracy, written by my mentor, Dr. I.D.E. Thomas. And in that book, he expounds about the Nephilim. And that book changed my life. It's why all the films, everything that we do, that's the jumping off part. That's the springboard for everything that I'm doing now, is that one book, The Omega Conspiracy by Dr. I.D.E. Thomas. That book changed my life.
Okay. So what was it about that book? I mean, what's the premise or the thesis of that book that sort of got its hooks into you and never left?
Are you familiar with the flood of Noah?
Sure.
Okay. Sodom and Gomorrah, the destruction thereof?
Yeah, a little bit sketchier about that one, but yeah.
Tower of Babel?
Yep, know that one.
Okay. Finally, when Joshua and Caleb go into the promised land and the mandate comes from a loving, holy God to wipe everybody out, are you familiar with that?
Nope.
Okay. Let's walk through it. So I'm reading the Bible. I'm 30 years old. I've never read the Bible. I'm born again and spirit-filled. I'm in spiritual boot camp for 3 years. I mean, right. It's very, very intense. The Spirit of the living God is pulling me out of the kingdom of darkness, which I had immersed myself in. Look, I forgot to tell you about the spirit guides that I had and the things that I invited into my life. I mean, I was immersed in the New Age. You know, I've been on both sides of the aisle. You know, I meditated every day for hours. My third eye was open. I had spirit guides. I've had all sorts of crazy stuff on the other side. So now when the Spirit of the living God takes me out of the New Age, out of the kingdom of darkness, it's spiritual warfare 101. This stuff is coming at me. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. That was 3 years. I had two mentors. I had my first pastor and Wayne Kendall that got me through that 3-year period. And it was very, very, very intense.
So what I'm gathering isn't that the Eastern philosophies, the third eye, all of that it wasn't just that you had decided that it wasn't correct or was nonsense or anything. It's that quite to the contrary. It was real. It just wasn't spiritual. It was anti-spiritual.
It was real, but it was deception.
Right.
Because all those things never deal with the fundamental problem of every human being on the planet. And that is our depravity. Your depravity, my depravity, everyone who's listening, their depravity. Oh, don't think you're depraved? When was the last time you lied? When was the last time you got angry? When was the last time you swore at a driver on the road? You know, the list is endless. When was the time you had an adulterous thought? When was the last time you hated somebody or swear at them or curse them, even under your breath? You know, when was the last time you stole something from someone? The list is endless. It just goes on and on and on. That's who we are. And we fight against that because that's not what we want to be. And yet those things creep up. They do in all of us and all human beings. It's there. Some people would call it the sin nature. So anyway, I'm born again and spirit-filled, and I'm reading the Bible cover to cover for the first time. I get to Noah and the flood, and I go, wait a minute. This isn't making any sense. Why are you destroying all these people except for 8 people on the planet? It's like, right. Wait a minute. Time out. I'm not buying this. The Jesus guy I get. Jesus I love. Jesus is wonderful. This guy over here in the Old Testament? Whoa. Not buying this guy at all. And then a few chapters later, I'm in the Tower of Babel. And I'm going, wait. What's so bad? We're just building a skyscraper and you're confusing their language? I'm not getting this. Then you get to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And at this point, it's like, I don't understand any of this. This isn't making sense to me. The kicker was when Joshua and Caleb are given the mandate to go into the promised land and wipe out men, women, children, animals, burn everything. I go, I almost threw the Bible across the room. That's genocide. That's genocide. There's no way around it. Genocide.
Is that when after Egypt, when they crossed back into Israel? Is that what you're talking about?
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, so this is like before the walls of Jericho, and
this is right at the gate when they're going into Jericho.
Yeah,
right.
I've heard a lot of, and I don't think I've heard anyone put it better, because a lot of it is very confusing. And of course, there's different authors and things like that. And,
sure.
But it was. I wish I could give credit to the podcast, but I honestly don't remember the name. But they were two American, Southern, like Southeastern, Eastern Orthodox priests, and basically said the entirety of the Old Testament is basically. It's something else, but it's the chosen people letting God down and killing giants. And I looked at it and go, yeah, that's sort of correct. And I've never really quite figured out how the flood when you were a kid, you learned that it was there because people were acting immorally, whatever, depravity. They were misbehaving, and then you look into, and then you hear from others and say, no, it's because the fallen angels came and they copulated with the daughters of Adam, and out of that became abominations, basically. The monstrous, demons, supermen, super creatures, and that's what it was. And then the flood was supposed to wipe them out, but apparently the flood didn't do it. I mean, which again is another question of, is this really an all-powerful God that he can't take care of his own business, and decides on a flood?
Let me jump in here, Jeff, because this is my wheelhouse. And right. when I got to the Promised Land, I mean, I almost threw the Bible against the wall. I don't understand this. It would be 10 years before I got the answer, and the answer was Dr. I.D.E. Thomas's book, The Omega Conspiracy, and he talks about the Nephilim and what they were. So here's the deal. The gateway to everything we just talked about is Genesis 3:15. That's the gateway. If we don't understand Genesis 3:15, we don't understand the rest of the Bible, and I mean that. If you're listening out there and you want to know about the flood of Noah, the Tower of Babel, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and finally the conquest of Canaan, and who the Antichrist is, if you don't understand Genesis 3:15, you won't understand the Bible. Genesis 3:15, Adam and Eve have just blown it in the garden. Their DNA has changed. They're hiding from the Lord. The dragon is there, Satan, the talking serpent. How does that work? Eve's not taken aback by that. She's dialoguing with this thing. How long did that dialogue go on for? I believe it could have gone on for weeks, months, perhaps years before she finally crosses over. We don't know. But the bottom line is the pre-incarnate Jesus is there. And he says to the dragon this one little phrase, which is the gateway to the entire biblical narrative. And unless we understand this, all we can do is tap dance around and say, well, God's ways aren't really our ways, and we really don't understand this. And, God is fair and just, but it might not look that way to us, and all this ridiculous stuff. The moment we plug in Genesis 3:15, it's like a set of dominoes. Bam, 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 right down the line. Here's what Genesis 3:15 says. The pre-incarnate Christ says to the dragon, to the serpent, your seed, your offspring will be at war between your seed and the seed, the offspring of the woman. The proto-evangelium, the one coming from the woman's seed, the Messiah, will crush your head. You will bruise his heel. Jeff, that's the whole deal. It's the whole deal. It's the whole Bible. Because 3 chapters later, the fallen angels come down. Why did they come down? They got one shot. if they can corrupt the seed, and this is the title of Doug Hamp's book, Corrupting the Image, if they can corrupt the seed, Messiah will not be born. Game over. Checkmate. You see, we're in a war, a heavenly war between the dragon and his forces and the Most High God. Yes, God can blink his eyes and the whole thing's over, but he's not going to do that. He's allowing it to play out. Why? And I'll tell you why, because, and I'm getting way ahead of myself, we are the replacements for the fallen angels. We are. He made something new because the angels had already rebelled and fallen. So he creates man. We're the replacements. And you know why he does this? Because I love him whom I've never seen. How does that work? I love him who I've never seen because of what he's done in my life, because of who he is. So the flood of Noah happens because the watcher angels come down. They procreate with the women, human women. They create this offspring known as the Nephilim, who are soulless, by the way. And the entire genome is contaminated except for 8 people. Except for 8 people. Everybody is contaminated. Everything. And according to the book of Enoch, these fallen angels messed around with the genome in the animals kingdom. So now we've got chimeras running around. This is why let's get the ones that are pure. And you say, well, why didn't he stop it? Of course he could have stopped it. But he didn't, because of the protocols of the heavenly war are in place. He could blink his eye and stop the whole thing. But then, as Gary Stearman would say, what about the rest of the angelic host? What is God so afraid of? So he allows it to play out. And he's allowing it to play out now. So the next thing is Tower of Babel. He confuses the language. He doesn't wipe everybody out. Then after that, it's Abraham and the 5 kings, but we'll skip over that. Most people don't know that, to Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah is a Nephilim stronghold. How do we know that? The book of Jude tells us. The angels who left their first estate in a similar way, Sodom and Gomorrah went after strange flesh. I'm paraphrasing. There it is. There it is. It's a Nephilim stronghold, and that's why it's destroyed. He allows it to happen. He allows it to go on for a period of time, and then he acts. And then finally, when he goes and visits Abraham, he says to Abraham, through your seed, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. That's where the Messiah is going to come from. But Abraham's 90 and Sarah's 90. So that's not going to work. Why is it that when Abraham and Sarah go down to Egypt, I got this from Chuck Missler, they go down to Egypt, Pharaoh wants Sarah in the harem. You know, wait. Pharaoh's not going to have a 90-year-old crone, with all due respect, in his harem. That's not going to work. Abraham and Sarah were regenerated, and that's what I got that from Chuck Missler. That's what I believe happened. Now Sarah is beautiful, just like she was in her 20s, and Abraham, and they join as husband and wife do, and that's it. But Jesus, because that's who's appearing to Abraham, says, through your seed, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. But you're going to go down to Egypt for 400 years until the sin of the Amorites comes into fullness. So 400 years later, and here's the kicker, 400 years later, when Moses leads millions of people out of Egypt, and they are poised in the promised land to go in, the Nephilim tribes are there. The seed of the dragon. Jeff, they're not human. They are soulless. The Anakim, the Zanzumim, the Emims, the Horites, they're all there. The Rephaim, the Nephilim, they're all there. It's the culmination of the seed war, which is absolutely unprecedented in all of history. And the 12 tribes, from those 12 tribes, Messiah will come. The dragon still doesn't know which tribe, but there it is. And on the field of battle, you have the dragon's forces. And on the field coming into it, you've got the line of Abraham, the chosen seed. It's unbelievable. And that's not taught, and most people don't know it, but that's exactly what it is. In some ways, it's the culmination of the seed war. The dragon's got his forces on the field of battle, the Lord's got his forces. Jericho, nobody does anything. They blow the trumpets and the walls fall down.
Right.
And that mandate to kill every man, woman, and child and animal and burn everything is because they are all genetically tampered with. The whole crew.
Even the animal. And
even the
my understanding with the animals is they couldn't tell the difference between which animals were tampered with and which weren't. So it's basically like when the chickens get avian flu here, they just kill all the chickens. So okay.
And it's not, Jeff, it's not taught in the churches, and so people don't understand. People like Richard Dawkins uses the Battle of Jericho to show how maniacal, capricious, bloodthirsty, the list is endless, genocidal the God of the Old Testament is. But once we factor in the Nephilim, everything changes.
So that's sort of where the Gnostics went wrong. I mean, I know Gnostics means a lot of things, but I mean, the ones I'm specifically referring to were in the early AD centuries who came up with this concept of demiurge, that wasn't God. It was some evil being, which, sort of makes sense with the narrative of what happened in the Old Testament. What you're saying is, no, you're ascribing bad intentions to what was just the only way to fight a war.
Bingo.
Okay. Got it.
Look, the Nephilim were after that because when Joshua and Caleb, this is my work. When Joshua and Caleb came into the Promised Land, there was a diaspora of these Nephilim tribes. There's no doubt about it, Jeff. This is why this is why this book, On the Trail of the Nephilim, and this is why. See, folks, you got like 30 minutes here, an hour maybe, right? That's it. I mean, there's 30 films and 13 and a half books. Do your homework, as Chuck Musler. This is the picture I discovered in the archives at Catalina Island. There's Ralph Glidden, circa 1919, 1921. Okay? In front of him is a 9-footer. That's a 9-foot giant. Catalina Island, I see it when I drive down my canyon every single day. When I drive down my canyon, there he is, Catalina Island. They were here. And recently, they've been talking about, the Paiutes and all this stuff, and the Sitika, the giants that the Paiutes that they herded into the Lovelock Cave and burned them all out and all this stuff. All that's true. There are legends from Native Americans, First Nation people, talking about the 6-fingered, red-haired, cannibalistic giants that were sexually deviant. So Richard Shaw and I, we go back to the museum. They've published this photograph. It's on the wall. This is the photograph that I discovered in the archive. What's wrong with that picture, Jeff? This is in a museum. What did they do? There's my book underneath it. My business partner, the late Richard Shaw, he passed away a few years back, held up the book. I took the picture. There's the original picture. They cropped the giant out of the picture. Right. Why would they do that, Jeff? Why would a museum lie to the public? Why would they do that? You tell me.
Maybe the museums were more influential than they are now. I have had a lot of people on the show who have said similar things to what you've said as well. And I'm sure that you are acquainted with, and probably in some ways friendly with, or professional rivals, or have different schools of thought. But Gary Wayne comes to mind because he was on recently, and he has I think he tells a similar version, but his is a little bit different. I mean, you said that you're a millennialist and you think we're in the end days. I can't remember. I don't want to speak for him, but he didn't think we were in the end days yet. He thought we were sort of close to the final 7, but we're not in the final 7. And maybe I'm skipping ahead because not everyone in the audience has heard all those shows and knows even what I'm talking about. So we'll put a pin in that. But where do you differ from, say, like the Reverend Jim Williamsons and the Gary Waynes and Billy Carsons and Zachariah Sitchin? Let's walk through it. Gary Wayne, I consider a friend.
I've interviewed Gary. He's in our films, On the Trail of the Nephilim, Mysterious Mound Builders. He's an incredible researcher. He spends a lot of time doing research, and I can't wait till the new book comes out and talk to him about it. I agree. We are not in the tribulation period yet. We hold that same view. I don't know whether he's pre-trib or amillennial, but that's what I am. If he said to you that we're close, but we're not there, I agree. We're closer than I've ever seen in 44 years walking. Jim Williamson, we also interviewed Jim for our UFO films in Watchers. So that's I haven't seen him probably in 10 years. And I consider Jim a friend and a colleague. It was Jim who talked about some of the things which I still use, some of the sayings I attributed to reading Jim's book and research. We're the only Christian ministry that has 10 films on the UFO phenomena. We're the only people that looks at this, through the lens of the biblical prophetic narrative. Where I differ with Zechariah Sitchin, and you should check out Dr. Mike Heiser, who's no longer with us. He passed away last year. And, Mike and I were friends in the early days, and then there was like a falling out, not on my end, on his end, but he's not here to defend himself. He passed away last year. He's a brilliant man, great researcher, prolific author. And we agreed on a lot of things, but there's a lot of things that we didn't agree on. There's a website that Mike created, www.sitchiniswrong. For all you Zechariah Sitchin fans out there, you can go and you can see the Sumerian text yourself. And you can see that this whole thing with the Anunnaki, they're just blowing smoke. They're just completely blowing smoke. And the straw man argument from Zechariah Sitchin and others of his ilk, well, the Anunnaki precedes the Bible. That's a straw man argument. That doesn't mean anything. So what? It doesn't mean that the Anunnaki, which are nothing more than fallen angels, doing exactly what we read about in the days of Noah, that's what it is. We haven't been visited by gods from other planets. We attributed them to gods. We worship them as gods, and we still do. Quetzalcoatl is a perfect example of that. And the Lord allows it to continue for a period of time, and then he acts. And when he decides to act, it's either Sodom and Gomorrah or the conquest of Canaan, because he doesn't mess around with it.
Here's the thing that always confused me. I mean, and it's the famous phrase, which I know that the translation is always a trick, but it's something like
you are gods.
They were giants among us in those days,
and also afterwards.
And it depends on, I guess, how you read that. But forget about whether there were giants before the fallen angels, because I already know what your view of that is. It's that no, of course they came afterwards. But they were also called the heroes of renown, or the great men of renown, and that's confusing to me because listen, I also know that great doesn't mean that they were great and terrific. Great can just mean they had a great influence. They had a large influence. Hitler was a great figure in history, but not great in that you celebrate him. It was just it made a large impact. So it could be that. But the heroes of old, heroes to me always had the same definition, but I could be entirely wrong. Maybe heroes meant something different, 5,500 years ago. So, we're also your Herculeses and your, Odysseus's and your Thors and whatnot. Were they the some of the Nephilim came out okay? Were they pretending to be okay, or were they all, the Medusa, or the dragons or whatnot, the Beelzebub?
Well, I mean, all this. I'm going to read you just another translation here. Remember, Moses is writing this thousands of years after the fact, and he could have said, anything.
Right, and he's writing it with 70 authors or something.
Yeah, this is from the Amplified version. They were they were Nephilim on the earth in those days, men of stature, notorious men, and also afterward, when the sons of God lived with the daughters of men, and they gave birth to their children. These were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown, great reputation and fame. So yeah, I mean, the Nephilim these are giants. This is Goliath. Goliath is a Nephilim. And, this is why when he's on the field of battle, everybody runs, because the Israelites can't figure out what are we going to do with this. I'll tell you something else, that Joshua and Caleb left the 3 cities, Gaza, in the Gaza Strip. They never conquered it. The 3 cities that they did not conquer are all in the Gaza Strip. I'm not saying Hamas are Nephilim. What I am saying is that the spirit that governs that area has never been deposed. And that's why October 7th was an absolute outrage. But what we see is the anti-Semitism boiling up. Why is that? Because the Messiah came from the tribe of Judah, the 12 tribes of Israel. They hate Israel, but they hate the Messiah more. They don't know that, but that's where the anti-Semitism comes from. It's the hatred of the one who came to set men free. And that's what he did. 2000
So you think there's a lot of people that think that they're working for the righteous, but they're actually working against it, and their anti-Semitism is just they took the poison pill, basically, of spirit.
They did. And with the rise of anti-Semitism is unbelievable. People need to read Amos 9. I will gather the captives of my people, Israel. They will inhabit the waste cities and rebuild them. They will plant vineyards and drink the wine of them. They will plant gardens and eat the fruit of them. And I will set them in their land, never again to be pulled out of their land. 1948, Israel, another prophecy. Israel becomes a nation in a day, unheard of in all of history, which fulfills that prophecy. They're back in the homeland, and I think what we're looking at with everything that's going on is Ezekiel 38, 39 war, because the three major players in that war, Iran, Russia, and Turkey, they're all in bed together already. Turkey's got a very sizable army, very formidable air force. You combine the 3 of those things together, and that's the Ezekiel 38 war. And once the Israelis clean out Rafah, and they need to clean out Rafah, there's no doubt, because Hamas is still playing footsie. And, they agreed to a ceasefire, but they changed the language in it. So, the Israelis look like the bad guys. Excuse me, this isn't what we wrote. This isn't what we were supposed to agree on. So Hamas tried to pull a fast one. And Israel said, nope, not doing it. And they went into Rafah. And they need to go into Rafah. You need to cut the head off the snake, end the story. And these goofy college kids have no idea of what's going on. None. Not a clue. Not a clue.
It's a little bit ironic that they're protesting about colonized land here on the United States, which is colonized land. So, anyway, I should probably date stamp it because we're talking about something that's happening right now. But this show is evergreen, and it's May 7th, 2024, and there's very much still a conflict between Israel and what I declined to call Palestine. Gaza, what used to be called the Self-Autonomous Palestinian Authority, but the Palestinian Authority hasn't controlled it for 17 or 18 years. Anyway, so you have the timestamps, so now you have sort of the, maybe by the time you listen to this, it'll still be going on. Maybe it'll be, in the past tense. I was planning to go into the UFOs, but I want to hear where Russia comes into this. I mean, Iran, Babylon, that sort of, we can get that. Turkey, they're a little bit more occluded, but Russia, why did they fit into this? Why are they part of that particular tribe?
Because Russia has armed Iran. They're already there. They're already Russian strategists, George W. Bush, strategists. They're all in bed together already. I mean, the Russians are already with the Iranians. They're already there, and their S-400 missile system completely failed against the Israeli Air Force. They just snuck right in and knocked the tar out of them. So the hatred, look, there's a saying I came up with years ago, 15 years ago, and it was a Holy Spirit saying because I'm not that smart, and it sets, it's what we see happening, but no one ever talks about it. Okay, and the saying is this. The current political landscape is in direct correlation to supernatural events that happened in some cases millennia ago. I'll say it again. The current political landscape, everything that we see happening globally, is in direct correlation to supernatural events that happened in some cases millennia ago. Let's walk through it. So you've got Israel that received the 10 Commandments and the law of Moses. That's a supernatural event. Did that color the body politic? By all means. Of course it did. I saw the IDF praying before they went into Rafah. They all had kippahs on. They blew the ram's horn. Where's all that come from? It comes from the law. It comes from Moses. It comes from thousands of years of walking in the paradigm of a supernatural event that happened 4,000 years ago. Conversely, you've got Islam, which believes in another set of supernatural events. The Prophet Muhammad receiving the Quran. Okay, that's a supernatural event. That happened. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. That event has colored the body politic. And here we are. A third set is in America.
Can I ask you a question before you go into
Go ahead.
It's said that he received the Quran from the angel Gabriel. Do you think that maybe it was a different being than the angel Gabriel?
I'm not going to comment on that. It's too explosive. Yeah,
fair enough.
I won't comment on that.
Well, I think that maybe you did without doing it, but that's all right. Okay, we'll move off of that.
Well, the third one is Christendom, all of Europe and all of America. Even though Obama stands up and goes, America's no longer a Christian nation. Says who? Says you? So you can believe what you want to believe. So we believe in the Messiah, in the person of Jesus. If it wasn't him, then who was it? Did we miss him? Because you can't get the genealogy anymore. Those records are gone. You can't get that. And you've got to be able to trace him back to David. The line. So how was that done? Because all those records were destroyed when the temple was destroyed. So that can't be done anymore. And then you've got the prophecies of where he's going to be born, how he's going to die. Read Isaiah 53. Why is Isaiah 53 forbidden to be read in synagogues? Why? It's Old Testament. It has nothing to do with the New Testament, because the prophecies in Isaiah 53 spell out exactly what happened at Calvary 2,000 years ago. So that event, that supernatural event, the rising from the dead, and your audience can't see it, but that's the Shroud of Turin. Right. The most investigated piece of artifact on the planet, and that's what his face looks like in repose, in the tomb. It's the greatest event in all of history. That has colored the body politic. It's why we have the freedoms, even though they're dwindling, in America that we enjoy. The springboard for all of it is Christianity, Judeo-Christian thought. That's where it comes from. That's why, and I'll just end with this, because I got to get going here. We got like 20 minutes left, less than 20 minutes. But the Wright brothers were able to invent the airplane because they had freedom and liberty to do so. They had the freedom. They had a bicycle shop, but Orville and Wilbur were going, I think this thing is going to fly. And they had the liberty to do that. Never before in the history of the planet have the common man, people, had freedom and liberty to pursue what they want to pursue. We've got that. I'm pursuing what I want to pursue here. I can do that. I'm a trail of a Nephilim. I'm paying taxes up the wazoo. I get that. But I'm free. I have liberty to pursue what I want to pursue. If I want to go to Peru and investigate the elongated skulls, too bad we're not on video, I can do that. I can do that. I have a liberty to go do that. I can do that. I can take the DNA. I can do the resources of the DNA. I can do the deep dive on the DNA and show that we're looking at something that's genetic. It's not a human being as we know it. I have liberty to do that. For the first time in all of history.
It's probably overly simplistic, but why are the Russians involved in this besides their weapons suppliers? Not to sound too trite, but they're the power broker Russians are white Christians. Why would they be sort of against Christianity?
God puts a hook in their jaw and draws them in. The hook's already there because they're in bed with the Iranians. They're in bed with the Iranians, and they're in bed with Turkey. They're in bed with the Islamic world. That's who they're sided with. And they will, not because L.A. Marzulli says this, but because the biblical prophetic narrative says very specifically, Rosh, which is Russia. They are going to come down out of the north, out of the far north, with all their hordes, and Iran, the Persians are with them, and Togarmah, Turkey, is with them. That's it. Now, I'm not saying that the Ezekiel 38 war is going to happen. What I am saying is that the players are on the stage for it, number one. Number two, once the IDF finishes Rafah, they go north into Lebanon. They have to. Why? Because 60 to 100,000 people, Israelis, are displaced. They're living in central Israel in hotels. So the kids aren't going to school. What is it? Day 228? I lost count. It's up there somewhere. Okay, 228 days since October 7th, and the kids aren't going to school. The crops aren't being grown. Businesses are closed. Nobody's doing anything. So the IDF has to go in and clear out Hezbollah, at least push them back to the Litani. That's only 15 miles. In my opinion, when they go in, it's not the Litani. They're not doing that. They're going to go into Beirut. They're going to completely clean them out. And if Syria gets involved, now you're looking at the ancient prophecy, once again, from the Old Testament, Isaiah 17, Damascus is a ruinous heap. Damascus is a ruinous heap. That's never happened. That's where we're headed. Those prophecies have been sitting there for thousands of years, and they're about to be unleashed, in my opinion. Too early to call, but when you see the IDF push past the Litani, now you know something's up. When you see the IDF, but they've already told the Iranians, if you do this, we'll destroy Damascus. They've already said it. I'm not making this stuff up. That's Isaiah 17. So we'll see how it goes.
Yes. I can't. I feel almost silly going from one to the other, but I don't. But I have a feeling it's not as silly as as that's the wrong word. The UFOs, where do they come into this?
Read 2 Kings, when Elisha and his servant Gehazi, they're surrounded by the Syrian army. Gehazi's freaking out. Elisha goes, Lord, open his eyes. So Gehazi walks out. Oh my gosh, above the Syrian army, he sees the chariots of fire. What are the chariots of fire? I'm not making this stuff up. It's all in the biblical narrative. It's all written, has been written for thousands of years, but most people poo-poo it. Most people have never read it, certainly not studied it. Elisha, the chariots of fire, Gehazi is looking at an object in the sky, and he calls it a chariot because that's the mode of transportation in his wheelhouse, in his grid, in his lexicon, and fire is all he knows. This thing's lighting up the sky, baby. It's a chariot of fire, and it's moving. That's a UFO, and those are the good ones. Those are the
bad ones too?
Huh?
They're bad ones too?
Of course. Look at the people who are abducted. Look at the people who are implanted. Look at the people who are carved up like cattle. Human mutilations.
Are the shapes different, or do they all the sort of typical disc?
What, the craft?
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good question, because we know that the craft, this is going to sound really weird, but the craft can morph and be actually a spiritual entity looking like this. Look, sure. Jeff, here's the deal. I don't have all the answers. Nobody does. But I know enough to know that there's a supernatural element to the whole UFO phenomenon, without doubt. Very much so. Because when people are abducted, they are levitated off the bed, and they go through the ceiling, they go through the wall, or they go through the closed window. That is manipulation of space, time, matter, and energy in ways that defy the physics that we know. That makes sense?
Yeah. Do you think that things like vampires and other myths, werewolves or whatever, are just sort of these demons that I'm going to say are also misconstrued as aliens, that's just human interpretations of demons, or maybe they in fact look that way. I mean, I don't know.
Demons are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. That's what they are, because they're soulless and they need something to inhabit. So demons have to inhabit a person or an object or an animal in order to manifest. The Greys are biological constructs for the demons to inhabit. They're avatars. That's what the Greys are.
They basically clone organic vegetables.
They're meat suits for the demons to inhabit.
What's also like Polarians and reptilians, or is it just the Greys?
No, the Greys. But the reptilians may be what the fallen angels actually look like. That's conjecture. It's conjecture, but that's what I think they are.
All right.
The tall whites are another phase. Look, it's a complex phenomenon, but we know this, that the phenomenon is real, it's burgeoning, and it's not going away. It's not going away. So people need to do their homework. They need to wake up. We have 10 films on the UFO phenomena. We have 8 films on the On the Trail of a Nephilim. We have 11 films in our Watcher series, which talk about everything from black-eyed kids to the Shroud of Turin to near-death experiences. I mean, there's 30 films. 30 films. We spent, 45, 50 minutes, an hour talking about all this stuff. 30 films and 13 books. People need to do their homework. And the problem is, and where we are as a culture, people don't want to do their homework. They want shorts on YouTube. There was an ad on the Super Bowl, and I got to get going here a little early, but I'm leaving on a plane tomorrow to a conference. But there was an ad, it's called Hello Down There. It was played in the Super Bowl. And in that, UFOs are all over the planet trying to, hey, here we are. No one's paying any attention. There's a woman on her goofy cell phone watching a cat claw the toilet paper and laughing hysterically. Meanwhile, there's a UFO right over her head. And finally, the Greys, because that's what they are in the commercial, they go, hey, down there, hello down there. And everybody starts waking up. And then what we see is everyone's looking up, and directly overhead are mile-wide UFOs. That, my friend, is predictive programming, in my opinion. No one even knows what the commercial was for, but it's predictive programming. That is the coming great deception. We don't have time to get into it, but I'll just say this, and I'll close and get out of your hair by saying this. If you have a nuclear event somewhere on the planet, and just today, Putin once again was rattling his nuclear saber. You have a nuclear event on this planet anywhere. That creates the greatest collective fear that humankind has ever experienced together. Because collectively, we're all on the internet, and if a nuke goes off, we're all going to see it. We're all going to experience it. It's going to terrify everybody. That's when they show up, Jeff. That's when they show up.
How do we know which are the good and which are the bad then?
Because the church will be raptured out of here. How do I know that? When Elijah goes up, Elisha, his servant, watches him transcend. When Jesus goes up into heaven, the disciples and Mary watch him go up, where? Into the clouds. When the 2 witnesses in the book of Revelation are killed and their bodies lay on the streets of Jerusalem for 3 days, this obviously is future, then they are resurrected. The entire world, via the internet, watches the 2 witnesses do what? Go into the cloud. Scripture tells us that the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel and the trump of God. The dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive and remain, get this, will be caught up together with those in the clouds to greet the Lord in the air. And so shall we evermore be with the Lord. You mentioned Jim Williamson? That's Jim's work. Jim taught me about the clouds. So get this. There's a saying I came up with a few years ago. We go up, they come down. We go up, they show up. We go up into the clouds. I wish this was on video. And out of the clouds come your mile-wide UFOs. And that's the great deception. How do I know that? Our work on Fatima, 1917. It had been raining all day. Been raining all morning. 70,000 people are gathered in the moors of Fatima waiting for the sign. The clouds part, then another cloud moves in front of the sun, and out of that cloud comes a dull silver disk, just like that. That's a harbinger of deception. That's a dry run of what we're going to see. We go up in the rapture of the church. Millions of people see us go up, just like Elijah saw Elisha go up, just like the disciples and Mary and who knows how many other people saw Jesus go up, just like the two witnesses, the entire planet will see them go up. And where do we go? Into the clouds, and out of the clouds come the motherships.
If you look up and things are going up and you see the flying disc, bad. If you look up and see people and they're just going into the clouds and there's no flying discs there, that's the good side.
That's the good stuff.
Okay. Where can people? I know that you got to go. So where do you watch your movies? Where do you find your stuff? Where do you buy your books?
Great. Thank you so much for having me on. LAMarzulli.com. LA Marzulli, M-A-R-Z, as in zebra, U-L-L-I, LAMarzulli.com. If you go there, you can stream all the shows, all the DVDs that we have. And the books are there. I mean, it's a store. There's 13 and a half books. There's 30 films and more coming. So do the deep dive, folks. Do your homework, as the late Chuck Missler used to say, because you're going to get this much out of a picture that's this big in an hour. You got to do the deep dive. Thanks so much for having me on, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Have a successful conference, and thank you for your time and your knowledge. Everyone, folks, check out his stuff, and thank you for checking out this show. And as always, if you can, give us a rating and a review, and let your friends and families and your 6 degrees of separation know about the show, and maybe especially this show. So, all right, great stuff. Thank you again.
I fall off my chair, and I'm wondering how I'll get down the stairs.